Well, hello everybody. Me again, Gary, the Attitude Adjuster. Nice to meet you all. On yesterday, which was the 20th, we had our meeting with the Moreton Bay Regional Council. That's the second meeting that I've had with councils. The other one was Brisbane City Council. Now, you might be asking, as farmers, how that affects you. You might be asking how that affects you as greenies. People who identify themselves as greenies, and most farmers, by wants the name, hate greenies. Most greenies hate farmers, and most residential people don't know farmers exist. They sort of think food comes from the magic place somewhere else. Now, the reason why I have been pushing this so far is my business is Lantana Removal Queensland. I started that business, but I've been removing Lantana for around 40 years now. I was doing the math the other day and it even shocked me. Now, the things that I know about Lantana that the Department of Primary Industries, the DAF, the Weeds of Weeds of National Significance crew, the whole joke that is our government entities related to weed control, biosecurity, the whole deal. It's an absolute farce. So I ended up, as I showed last time, I got hold of their book, the Lantana Best Practices Manual, Decision Support Tool, and that garbage, which was, according to the department when I tried to get it, out of print. That was so successful that they don't even print it anymore. But anyway, I got a copy from Biosecurity Queensland, thanks to a lovely lady in there that said she could probably find me one, and the next day it popped up, which was wonderful. Okay, I'm talking fast because my videos end up long. So what comes of it is that the Anastasia Palaszczuk's government, the wonderful ecological giants that they are, created and secretly changed the classification through the Biosecurity Act. Okay, so this is where we are all stuffed and stuck. They changed the Biosecurity Act to declassify or drop the classification on Lantana. Now, all of you only hear me talk about Lantana. This isn't just about Lantana. So many of you are far more knowledgeable than I am. I don't give a rat's about the botanical names for things, okay? I only care about what they do for the ecology and that principle, okay? So Lantana was declassified or lower the classification so that they can now ignore it. Why have they done that? They've done that because the federal government, through the weeds initiatives and the weeds councils and all this other garbage through Mr. Turnbull, who I've written to many times and still have never heard from, offering to show him the extent of the Lantana up here and explain to him exactly why this is a national catastrophe and a national crisis. Now, the DPI has walked onto farms for generations saying you must get rid of that, and farmers have killed it. Yet the DPI writes books that do not even resemble the reality of Lantana. I went to them originally. This is how this first started. And I said to them, I have a revolutionary way of dealing with Lantana, and I get 98 to 100% kill rate with no chemicals and no regrowth. None. Zip, zilch, done, finished, none. And the lady that wrote the handbook on Lantana, not that book, their name's in there too, but wrote the actual brochure on how to deal with Lantana in the DPI, said to me, well, listen, mate, hey, if you've got such a fantastic revolutionary system, I can open doors for you with Landcare and with other organisations. The only kicker is you've got to come in here and you've got to show us it for free, has to be for free, and then we'll decide if we like it or if it's any good to us or whatever, or whether it's truly revolutionary, and we'll go from there. Now, I told the Darren Grimwade at Moreton Bay Regional Council this yesterday, and he nearly fell off his chair laughing and went, yeah, and why don't you hand over your patents and your checkbook and your credit card and all your keys at the same time? Now, you know what? I had exactly the same conversation with Brisbane City Council, okay? And Brisbane City Council said, yeah, but we don't do anything with Lantana anyway. It's zero on our list. We don't even touch it. If we fall over it on our way to something else, we might squash it, but it's unlikely we will do that either. Now, that's one of the most wealthy councils in Australia. Okay, and they have zero money spent on Lantana. But sir, don't worry about it, because we have far more contractors and other guys that we'll use before we'd ever ring you. Okay, but please come on down to our crew and demonstrate your revolutionary new method. It's like they heard the first conversation, but it must be for free. And see, first note, it must be for free. I must have idiot tattooed across my forehead, you know. Anyway, so I created such a ruckus with Brisbane City Council that they sent their guy out here to talk to me, sit down with me, go through things. And again, I said, I'm not prepared to tell you guys or show you guys what I do. It's my living. This is what I do for a living. I've spent 40 years perfecting what I do. I'm not giving it away for free. Anyway, so they gave me a spiel about, you know, how wealthy they are and how much money they have come in from their ratepayers and all this sort of stuff. And then they went on in the conversation to say, but we only use volunteer labour anyway. We have volunteer organisations, which would be land care and other things, and they do all the work for us for free. And you look at it and you go, okay, a minute. So they go in by hand, they butcher their stuff, they poison the stumps, they kill everything on the ground through the mycorrhizal fungi. It goes past their stuff and you look at it and it is absolute desert, okay, even 6 months later. So yeah, that's a sound way of dealing with that. But the system doesn't work in a lot of areas, and it's terribly labour intensive and costly if you are paying for it. But the kicker of it is the council actually then looks like to the public that they're actually doing some work, and they don't do any work on Lantana. See their first comment. They have stressed that a dozen times. We do not touch Lantana anyway, and even if we did, we'd use other people anyway, because they don't create a shit fight. Yeah, they're not naughty like you. So okay, so how does that affect you farmers? Well, you know what? You guys are pushing stuff uphill with a pin, because none of these people care a damn about farmers. They're not a strong enough group. You know, the agricultural minister, took about 7 to 8 weeks for my letter to get from the Prime Minister and the Queensland Premier and the New South Wales Premier to Mark Furner's desk and then be responded to. Now, all I got was dribble about, we've got 600 chemicals to poison Lantana with. You all know if you don't poison Lantana at the exact right time of the season and whatnot, and let's say growth cycle, then you are only creating a hybridized animal that is now what's the name to that poison. Okay, you talk to farmers and they turn around and they go, well, there's probably only about 5 or 6 of those poisons that are any real use to you, and of that, again, see rule number 1, if you don't poison them at the right time, you are just creating a bigger problem. Okay, so that's how seriously his office took that. In the quotes that they gave me about getting the book, I'd already tried to get the book and the books weren't in print. So that showed you how up to date they were with their methods and everything else. Now, one of the greatest spreaders of Lantana is water. Okay? Now, in all of the literature I've read, and I've read a ton of literature, and I'm dyslexic and I do not like reading, okay? Nowhere do they go and mention water as the vehicle of travel for this material. Okay? Many farmers will turn around and go, well, I watch it pour out of the state forest there, and it comes straight down the ravines and gullies and creekways and waterways and the headwaters of these tributaries that then flow into the creeks and rivers, and the Lantana keeps on going, following that path. But it's only birds and it's only mammals that spread that Lantana. But see, they obviously just track that 100-metre corridor all the way down there in a continuous level of expansion. I tell you what, when you really get stuck into the DPI and the environment mines, whatever they call themselves now, they change their names so quickly you can't keep up with it. They actually do admit, off record, that they do know water transmits this disease, this cancer. Now, why would the government, why would Anastasia Palaszczuk, her government, her whole mechanism not include water in the major vehicle of this movement of this material. They have Lantana that's in central Queensland, Western Queensland, that they say they can't imagine how it was ever going to get there for another 30 or 40 years, but it's there. But you know what? It came with the floods. Let me think about that. Think about it, but nearly every farm and nearly every set of circumstances around our country, the national parks and the state forests, not state forests altogether, but the national parks are high country. And every one of us knows how much garbage is pouring out of those national parks. Wouldn't you say that once you define that water is the vehicle of travel by this material, that somewhere along the line somebody with enough muscle and enough money, or maybe a what do you call it, a civil case, or whatever you call a case when everybody joins together, well, you'd have to think somewhere along that line these guys may have a problem. Now, they've gone to its low risk. It expands, it's 10 million hectares now. That if you put 10 animals per hectare and you say, well, okay, and that's minimum, farmers would argue there's probably, triple that amount, and be right in it. Okay, I'm just picking a figure that can be easily justified and just go 10. That's 100 million animals that have been evicted under the Palaszczuk, these other governments. 100 million, 150 million, what do you want to put the figure on? Have been evicted, and not one green person has worked that out, right? To say, hold on a minute, because they are coming to me through Facebook, and they are using exactly this written lies, this written material, to say, oh, well, maybe some animal might use Lantana. The government doesn't even tell you what animal it is. Even if they came forward and said to you it's a blue-tailed, spot ring-tailed possum, that's what uses it. You have 100 to 150 million animals evicted from their homes today. Okay, how many of them have died from not being able to get food resources or water resources? Okay, these people come to you and they go, well, listen, with the Lantana, we can't just remove all the Lantana because that'll cause too much of a shock to the system. The Lantana I work in, the real Lantana, okay, it's a thicket. There is nothing in that Lantana, okay? You will find one tiny thing occasionally on the very edge of the Lantana. You find nothing in the middle of it. Remember, once again, I'm talking about full-blown thickets. We're not talking about a plant here and a plant there. So, when you argue about my mechanically moving it, which I'm moving not that fast real time, and I'm throwing it up in the piles and it gets processed later, those animals can move away from me. You don't bother to say anything or cry for those 100 million, 150 million animals that are already evicted, but you're talking about the government that says maybe one of them might use it. But have a look at their book and have a look at the disclaimer in that book. They are not responsible for anything. If you follow that handbook, under any circumstances, you can never go back to them and say, Jesus, you caused a problem here. There's that many disclaimers in that book. Yet any farmer doing anything, is held accountable for any action he takes, any action they take. See, the council doesn't have that problem because they don't take any action. They don't do any work. Okay? This is a fact of this stuff. And it was caused by your wonderful Anastasia Palaszczuk government, because they changed these laws and allowed this to happen. Okay? Now, they've been aware of this for a considerable amount of time. They've also had delivered to them on their doorstep hard copy of how the plant has actually killed children and people. Okay? It's actually killed people. Now, that's a fact. It's in the medical, what's the name of the Children's Hospital, Queensland. Now, how do they get a low-risk plant that expands by 20 to 30% in a bad year? 50 to 100% in a good year, okay? And if it's got its ass in water, 110%. It just doesn't stop propagating. And best part is, while it's sitting its bum in water, it's getting trafficked even further down this tributary. And these guys say, well, no, we don't want to know about this. But the farmers are killing koalas. The farmers are killing animals. The wildlife joke of a World Wildlife Fund of pulling dozers through the scrub. These pictures in this book, really, we should all get together sometime and have a go through this book. You know, everything they show with earth moving and with clearing is 30 to 50 years old. It's more like 50 years old. And everything in their books, right, they've spent a fortune on writing, not that publication only, tons and tons of publications. They revise this work all the time. They're paying their scientists and the DPI guys all the time to rewrite all crap. And then they turn around and go, yeah, but we don't stand behind any of it. Okay? There's nowhere that we actually say that this will stand by this and it will be actually how these things are decided. So all the money they spent through the weeds of national significance got shot in the foot because they then lowered the to low risk. Okay, low risk is defined because they define that it can't that it's out of control and they can't get on top of it, because they never had any workforce like us that can go into steep country and get that material out without causing massive amounts of damage, right? So they just decided, we will give up. We have 10 million hectares, heading to 35 million hectares by what they say. I'm telling you, we don't have to wait. They say that would be by about 2040, 2050, okay? I'm telling you, you don't have 10 years to wait for the 35, 40 million hectares. But we're not going to top out at 35 million hectares. We are not going to top out at that. We are going to keep going. And then we're going to have trouble with our farms even growing food. And this is all because of the Anastasia Palaszczuk government, the New South Wales government, the Mr. Turnbull. It's all because of these people, and because they've stuffed their head in the sand and said, we're not worried about it. Then they've come in with these beautiful no clearing laws and complicated the issue even further. But did they do it by accident, do you think? Have a look at the fact that they say now, within that the regulations of the Act on the clearing, if it's over a 5% grade, you're not supposed to go in there with machinery. Okay, you can't take the topsoil or any of the soils off there. Now my system doesn't do that, but they've now given themselves an excuse. Okay, I'm telling you, all Lantana must come out of the high country first because it travels by water. Farmers be right on with this. They'd understand the principle really easy, but we have to get this through to the DAF and the DPI and the scientific boffins. Hey, did you know they're having a weeds conference? And that weeds conference is to beat their chest and tell you how fantastic they are with their biological controls. The biological controls that they've released, that the best that I've seen them say is 20%. But we got some other U-buttes in the system that we're pretty... Well, we think they might be. Oh, yeah, I think they'd be pretty good. What about the ones that they've already released that are taking down all the saplings? Well, we don't hear about that. How much money they spent in creating a sterile plant that when they released it, within one season, 1 year, the nature had grafted that one back to the original strain of Lantana in the country and unsterilised. Why did we pay for that in the first place? Because the government happily tells you that they've got all these departments that I've never heard of. You've heard of DAF, DPI, you've heard of all these guys. I had one from a different mob the other day, and they're saying they have 700 experiments running, the government does, that we're paying for. You know, biological control is never going to be any good. It never has been. I do 100%. They do 20% on a selective thing, and they don't even define what the 20% was. The 20% was only that they reduced the seeding rate of the plant. Not that they got 20% less, or they got 20% however, or they killed 20. No, they only affected the seeding rate of the plant at 20%. But see, we don't have to worry about that. What our biggest problem is that the councils are leaving this material growing in areas now where it is supercharged. It's in areas where it has complete access to water and it has complete access to unlimited travel. And these boffins and scientists worked out their system on another way of working it out that they haven't even figured on this changes to this thing. That's why I'm in front of you telling you about this. Hey, business is going to be good. You guys want to get into the business. It's going to be booming in another couple of years under the Palaszczuk government. Like, if you want a brilliant business career to expand limitlessly, just leave the Palaszczuk government and the Turnbull government where they are. But we've got to stop that garbage, and we've got to start voting on these things. I contacted the Qatar party, never heard a response back. I've contacted the One Nation. I got, oh yeah, hand us the material over, we'll see what we can do. Then it's to, well, we'll give it to this guy, and if he can do anything with it, he'll get back in touch with you. What do you do with that? Why not just say, we can't do anything with it, we're not interested? You look at Turnbull, has never responded. You look at Mark Ferner, well, all it does is go around in circles. Nothing ever gets actually said. Anastasia Palaszczuk never has responded. The New South Wales Premier never responded. It's only handed back to Mark Ferner. So this endless loop, and that's your agricultural minister. You reckon he'd be interested in weeds, wouldn't you? You reckon he'd be interested in what happens for farmers? You know, that is where we've gone wrong, is farmers as a group don't have any power. They're not really very good, okay? They work their asses off. They're too busy to be able to fight a war, and realistically, nobody's supporting them. But where this has become a major issue is that it's not actually them that's going to make this difference. It's the people in Sanford, in Debra, in Mount Gloria, Somerset, Esk. It's those people in those areas there that have this material sitting in their front doorstep. And the price of removing Lantana at what it is, people need to start knowing that before they buy a property. So what's going to happen is the actual land prices are going to plummet. Now, when they plummet, that's when the politicians are going to start taking notice, because that's Mr. and Mrs. Ma and Pa. That's not Mr. and Mrs. Farmer way out west that doesn't matter to anybody except their family. Hold on a minute. Aren't they related to some of the people living in the city? Why aren't the people in the city sharing their story? 100 million animals homeless. Nobody cares. The green people are talking about a bulldozer pulling chains that's who knows how old, because I haven't seen the actual ad, that farmers are killing koalas. Are you serious? You Muppets are making garbage up like that, and there's 150 million animals homeless today, and you're talking about that sort of rubbish that isn't even, that's a misrepresentation of that. The forestry's done stuff like that. It's been done rampantly all over the place. So why are we talking about that? You know, you have National Parks and Wildlife as a standard procedure, councils as a standard procedure to walk in and throw a match into the stuff, to walk in and throw a match and set the whole bush alight. Yet the limited amount of bush that actually benefits from fire is nowhere near what you think it is. It's a much more limited area. And when you increase the fire load like that, you increase the volatility of it. It's up in the canopies where it wouldn't normally be. The fire would just run through the brush at the feet of the trees and it'd just do no problems. Now, hold on a minute. This is a very serious issue. I'm sure I've seen where bracken fern and other things like that come back after fire stronger than anybody else. I know I've seen those places burnt out, and that was the councils doing it, because they got it that bad they just threw matches into it and burned it. Now hold on a minute. While you're busy telling me that my moving in there with machinery and taking that Lantana out is going to bother that fictitious animal that the government won't name, okay? Then tell me, how many of the koalas or things do you think get out of the way of that fire? And it's a very serious, intense fire. It's not a limited little itty-bitty fire. And you reckon that's okay. But there's 100 million animals without homes. There's something wrong if you're really that green, or you really are a wildlife carer, and you really do care about what you're talking about. Because when you read the books, and all there is poisons or fire, okay? They ban mechanical because they don't want us to say we can get up into that high country and we can clean it out without taking the trees off the country. They don't want to hear that, because then they'll have to put their hand in their pocket and pay for it to be done. You can't imagine what our ecology is going to look like in 10 years' time when it's over 50 million hectares. Okay? You can't imagine what changes that's going to be. Every single day that they leave this stuff expanding, okay, it's getting into tougher terrain. You know, we can knock the edges off this stuff and really hammer it into the middle of next century, right, by strategically taking it out of the places where it has the prime ingredients for its expansion. But they themselves say that the longer you leave Lantana there, the more it costs in removal. Okay, so I was quoted as saying it doesn't cost much to get rid of Lantana. Now, it costs a lot to eradicate Lantana and take a Lantana out of a thing in a thicket base, okay? What I'm saying is it costs nothing. If that Lantana's just sprouted in your paddock and you go get it, it's nothing. It's nothing of a plant. It's not even a real hassle of a plant. But the key is, and the government tells you this, it's getting it early. Don't let it get started. Now, when they did that other piece about the Lantana and it spreading, they were saying that huge areas of our state are written off, right? Our suburbs are quite literally written off. That's why the local people need to change their story and get on board and start harassing this down, because you're going to be having your property values fall through the floor, okay? What they say is that they're going to defend the line at the Daintree, and they're going to defend the line at the base of New South Wales. Everybody in between is on their own. They didn't have a referendum for this. They didn't have a referendum to say, should we give up? You know, this is a national security issue that is of a scale that's as big as the invasion of Australia in World War II, or the attempted invasion of Australia in World War II. This affects every single living being, every single person, child, and child to be born. What we do today at 10 million hectares makes a difference of whether this ends up being something at 30 million hectares. What do you think the government's ever going to do? Are they ever going to take it on? Of course not. If they get it past this point, I can tell you that I don't believe they'll ever try. I'm positive that I could train, I could teach, and I could create the workforce to be able to go into the high country. That's the key. Look, it's not a case, farmers will clean it out of the flat country for you like it's going out of fashion. These people have been doing it for generations. Absolutely generations. You know, why the DPI ever got away with their lies of saying it, they say it has a 4-year, a 7-year seedbed. I clean it out of areas where it's 40 feet thick and there's zero comeback. Okay, in other areas there might be 2%, and I go along on a rainy day and I pluck the little heads off them, pull them out of the ground, the whole lot. I don't pluck their heads off, I take the whole lot, take them out, and I feel great. It's just like, oh yeah, come on you little beauty, and I rip them out of the ground, and they're gone, and I can cover an acre in a matter of 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Let them get to be where that you can get a good grip on them. Gone. Just like pulling carrots. Gone. Throw it away. Done. They're lied about so much. If you stack the stuff up, it'll reshoot and it'll regrow. Now, there are certain parts in this country which you have to draw another conclusion to, which is Tully and North Queensland, where, you know, growth is just that massive. Maybe there. Here, in southeast Queensland, I've spent huge amounts of time doing the opposite to what they say is the norm, to challenge what they say is the scientific fact. I have piles of Lantana there, big piles, that have rotted off completely without ever being a shoot. Now, in that stuff, if they had have ever shot, I was planning to burn the pile, but I had got part way through it and went, well, no, hold on, it's going, no, nothing's happening. So where's the 4-year seedbed? Okay, I can tell you that. That's another part of their lies. Anastasia Palaszczuk's government and the whole concept of this. They want this misinformation out there. They fought the Lantana down in the flat country, okay, down in the creeks and tributaries, okay? And the council said, well, you know, under your scientific tutelage, we're not, it's back. It's back. It's back again. Of course it's back. They're fighting that Lantana up in the top of Mount Glorious. That 100-year-old Lantana that has his bloody stumps as big as my arms. That's what they're fighting. But they're fighting it down here in the flat country, where it's got a 4-year seedbed. Where you took it out over there, it had no seedbed. Never came back. And it's had the best weather, the best rains, the best everything, and it never came back. So why lie about that? Why make that out to be such a tough ask to get rid of that plant? Because they have 80% of the stocks of this plant. The government is sitting on this amount of these plants. And the only workforce they'll send in will be around strategic tourist development areas, and that will be Landcare. How does Landcare solely get these grants and these grants and this money? How does that happen? How does somebody not go, there's something wrong with this mix, that one group gets all that money and they go in there by hand with volunteers, so the government doesn't pay a lot of money for that work? Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And the people that don't know any better look there and go, oh, somebody's pulling out the Lantana. They're doing a good job. Look, the Lantana's going. But a lot of these national parks and wildlife people are either falling over dead or just about with this imaginary Lyme disease. Yeah, all right, you're right. You're right, it's not Lyme disease. It's a derivative of it. It's an Australian derivative of Lyme disease. But our medical staff are so third world country in this country, right, because the government has been cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting budgets, okay, that your bloods have to be sent to the United States to be diagnosed with a disease that you got in Australia. Our medical situation in Australia is equal to our NBN and equal to a lot of other things in this country under the Turnbull government. But you'll only hear them patting themselves on the back with our money, doing ads to tell us how fantastic they are, to go, we've got 1% interest rates around that, right? So the country's in a recession from when I grew up, and they're creating 1,100 jobs a day almost, and the employment rate is static and has been static for years. That's strange, isn't it? There's a mathematics problem there, isn't there? Where are the 1,100-ish jobs every day? Where? And you reckon the employment rate would be changing, wouldn't you? So anyway, you know, that's a very interesting thing. We're told this, and then suddenly they've got all this money to throw on the table and be beating themselves on the chest with One Nation and Mr. Turnbull and, whoa, look at all this money we got. We're going to give you tax cuts. And maybe by 2040 we'll have the power bill back down to, well, you won't have to mortgage your house. You won't have a house by then because it'll be swallowed up by the Lantana. You know, there are some very serious issues that are happening across our country, and these guys brainwash us through mainstream media. All of these things I've given you are factually facts that you can look up, and this stuff's been given to media stations, media channels, and asked to take up this story. And you reckon they'd want to take on a bone like this? You know, you've got all of the clearing laws, which are only a smokescreen that they came up with to say we are brilliantly about the land and the environment, where really it was only a bigger tax. So whoever gets a permit to clear land now will be paying a premium for that permit. A person can't even clear the Lantana from the creek side without paying for a $3,000 expert to come out and assess whether they can do that. You know, who was the $3,000 expert? Where did they come from, these experts? Now, we know why the council demands and the government demands that you utilise these people's services, because they don't have any expertise in these materials. You've only got to read the books to find that out. You really should try and get yourself a copy of those things and have a real good look through it. They have reworked and worked 50 to 100-year-old studies that were done. They've never. I'm not saying, please, I'm not saying that they should spend money on doing new studies, because they're not going to be any better than the people that did the old ones. You know, it's not going to have a better solution. You look at it. From 2000, they created the Weeds Council of Australia. They created the Weeds of National Significance. 32 weeds on the list. We have more Lantana today by more than double. Okay? Under the most managed time